Hey guys, tonight we're walking onto the soundstage of one of the most efficient, glamorous, and quietly merciless business operations in American history, the major Hollywood studio system of the 1950s, and what it actually cost to be a woman inside it. Not the red carpets, not the fan mail and the searchlights and the names in lights on Sunset Boulevard, the balance sheets, the suspension clauses, the 4 a.m. call sheet, and the physician who carried a small case and answered to a studio, not to you. If you've been here a while, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this kind of midnight history that is somehow both very glamorous and very much not. And if one of you suggested this topic, thank you genuinely, and I hope you're somewhere comfortable, because we are about to have a long conversation about what it costs to have your face on a movie poster. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always somehow 5 a.m. somewhere, which feels appropriate tonight, and I suspect at least a few of you are horizontal and already losing the battle against sleep. Good, that's the plan. Dim the lights, turn on a fan if you have one, get comfortable, pull the blanket up, and maybe don't read the fine print on anything tonight. Have you ever wondered what a 7-year contract actually meant when the studio could pause the clock whenever they felt like it? What it took to walk through a studio gate at dawn and not yet be the person the camera was going to film? Why 18 months of electrolysis appointments were listed somewhere in a production budget as a line item? Did you know a 2-pound weight gain could trigger an intervention before lunch? Could you survive a 4 a.m. makeup call? A 12-hour shoot under lights that ran hotter than a summer afternoon in Phoenix, and then do it again tomorrow because technically your turnaround was a suggestion? The gossip columnists, what exactly were they being given? And by whom? And in exchange for what? And what happened to the women who said no? Congratulations. You've just woken up in Hollywood, California, 1953. Your name is on a contract, your face is on a billboard, and somewhere in a Culver City office building, you are listed on a balance sheet between a camera crane and a studio lot. Good luck. You wake up before the city does. The call sheet says 4, not 4:30, not 4:25, 4. And the call sheet is binding. You drink something brown that you did not make and you do not entirely identify. You put on the dress you arrived in last night because the dress you'll spend the day in is hanging in a building 3 miles away with your name on a paper tag pinned to the hanger. The clock above your stove says 3:51. You have 9 minutes. The makeup chair is waiting. It knows your face better than you do at this point, and it has opinions about your cheekbones that it expresses through foundation and contouring, and a grease paint base that smells like industrial ambition and something faintly medicinal. A woman named Dottie, or sometimes a man named Hal, is already there when you arrive, brushes arranged in a row, not looking up. The process takes 3 to 4 hours. No one apologizes for this. It is not an inconvenience. It is the schedule. Let's talk about what 3 hours in the chair actually means. It means the sun comes up while someone else is deciding what your eyebrows do today. It means your real face, the one you woke up with, the one that ate the unidentifiable brown thing, gets packed under layers of pancake and powder and a wig that sits on your head like a very confident hat. By the time Dottie steps back and squints, you are someone slightly different from the person who walked in. That person is more symmetrical, more balanced, and slightly more reliably photogenic than the version of you who walked in. That person does not technically own her own face. The studio does. Elizabeth Taylor's brows, for the record, were being managed by salaried MGM aestheticians when she was 12 years old. 12. The studio had a position for that. There was a budget line. Now, the soundstage itself. You've been in the building since 4, and the first frame doesn't roll until 8 or 9, which means you have spent 4 or 5 hours getting ready to stand inside a room that is, depending on the production and the season, somewhere between uncomfortable and a crime against respiratory health. The Technicolor arc lamps run hot. Not warm, hot. The kind of hot that makes the sawdust on the floor smell like a decision. The kind that crisps the edges of the gels and occasionally the eyelashes they were paid to flatter. A closed soundstage under full carbon arc can push past 100 degrees, and you are standing in it wearing a corset, a structured petticoat, 2 layers of period-appropriate undergarments, and a wig that has strong feelings about ventilation. The smell in there is specific. Sawdust and grease paint, yes. But also the particular tang of burnt carbon rod, the chemical breath drifting in from the developing lab, 2 buildings over, and underneath all of it, very faintly, the sweat of every person who has stood on this mark before you. The soundstage does not open a window. The soundstage does not do that. A grip named something like Roy adjusts a reflector 6 inches to the left without looking at you, then steps back and checks it, then moves it 4 inches to the right. You stand there while this happens. You are currently functioning as the problem the light has been asked to address. This is not personal. Roy has done this since before you were under contract. Roy will do this after. The call sheet said 4. The day ends when it ends. The SAG turnaround rule, 12 hours between shoot days, exists on paper in a building none of you are currently in. It is, in practice, a suggestion the production has already decided to feel complicated about. You have 9 more hours minimum. Possibly 12, possibly more, if someone decides to run the scene again from the top, because the lighting is doing something interesting to the left side of your face, and the director wants to see whether interesting is useful. You drive west on Washington Boulevard in the dark, the same route, the same hour, 6 days a week. The guard at the Culver City gate knows your name and your car, and he checks the badge anyway because the rules require him to check the badge. You roll the window down. You hand over the laminated card with your face on it, 2 years younger and 3 pounds thinner, and you wait while he confirms what both of you already know. The card is not a security measure. The guard hands it back without looking at it twice. The lot at 5:15 has the focused quiet of a building that has been awake for an hour without committing to it yet. A truck reverses near the east parking structure. Somebody in costume runs across the gap between stages 4 and 7 carrying a hat. The hat is the only thing you can see clearly. The rest of the figure resolves into a silhouette with shoulders. A second guard, at the inner gate before the sound stages, is reading a sports section. He folds it in half when he sees you coming, the way a man folds a newspaper when he has been told who walks by at this hour and which faces are allowed past which checkpoint. He nods. You nod. Neither of you produces a sentence. Now, Brenda at the front lot entrance, not the gate guard, the woman at the visitor's desk inside the first building, hands you a revised call sheet with the focused indifference of a hotel concierge. She has handed you a revised call sheet every Tuesday for 14 months. She holds it the way a pharmacist hands over a prescription, efficiently, without eye contact, as if the contents are your business and not hers. The call sheet says the morning's blocking has moved to stage 7. Stage 7 is smaller. Stage 7 runs hotter. You fold the paper and keep walking. Past the inner gate, the lot opens up. A street of sound stages, each one numbered, each one with a small painted sign above the door. Stage 7 is the third on the left. The asphalt between buildings is still cool. By 11 it will be soft enough to take a heel print. The makeup building is at the end of the street. The light is on. The light is always on at this hour, the way a kitchen light in a farmhouse is always on by 5. You walk toward it the way you walk toward any building you have walked into 6 days a week for 14 months, automatically, without curiosity, with the practiced calm of a person who is on the schedule and is, in turn, the schedule's. You sit in the chair at 5 and you don't get up until 8. The woman doing your face has done it 300 times and could do it in her sleep, which is good because at 5 in the morning one of you is in fact close to sleeping. She doesn't ask how you slept. She tilts your chin, left, right, and patient, and reaches for a small jar of cream the studio bought in bulk. The face she's about to make is not yours. Let's talk about what that means practically. Your nose is being narrowed. Your brows are being drawn thinner than they actually grow, because a stylist made that decision in 1948 and wrote it in your file, and now it is simply what your brows are. If you're Elizabeth Taylor, and it's 1946, and you're 12, you don't have a file yet. You're getting one. The MGM aesthetician pulls a small set of tweezers from her apron and begins. Nobody explains why. 12 is not an age you argue with women in aprons. The products come out in a specific order. Foundation, then powder, then liner, then colour, each layer setting before the next goes on, building something structural, the way you'd lay brick if brick could be applied with a sable brush. By the time the wig goes on, you're carrying approximately 3 pounds of costume on your head alone, which is technically the size of a small infant or a very respectable rotisserie chicken. The wig has its own assistant. The wig assistant has an opinion about the wig that no one asked for and no one will ask for. The chair itself has opinions. It tilts when it shouldn't. The armrests are cold. It faces a mirror that is lit from above. in a way that's technically accurate for film and categorically unkind for everything else. You learn not to look directly at it during the first hour. You look at it when you have to. Meanwhile, the soundstage is being heated. Not intentionally. The carbon arc lamps have been running since 4:30, and a closed stage under full Technicolor lighting reaches temperatures that a modern OSHA inspector would describe, using words the industry wouldn't have recognized. In 1953, sawdust on the floor. Grease paint and sweat already baked into the wooden flats from the chute before yours. The smell is specific. Burnt carbon rod on top, sawdust underneath, and then something warmer, the accumulated heat of bodies that have been standing in front of those lights for 20 years. You will walk into it in a corset. The corset was fitted at dawn by Edith Head or one of her people. A long-line bra, a waist cincher, a structured petticoat that adds 2 inches of visual circumference and removes 3 inches of actual circumference. Lana Turner's file specified 20 inches. Not suggested, specified. The instruction accompanying it was to avoid deep inhalation during takes. You breathe at the top of your lungs, short and careful, like someone keeping a secret from their own ribcage. A woman named Dolores, who has been doing hair on stage 14 since 1941 and has outlasted 4 studio heads and 2 unions, pins the final piece into place, steps back, and tilts her head with the detachment of someone reviewing tile grout. She adjusts one curl by a 1/4 inch. She does not say it's good. She puts the pin away. That's how you know it's good. By 8 o'clock, the face is finished. It will last approximately 4 hours under those lamps before it needs touching. The touch-up artist follows you between setups with a small kit, arriving beside your shoulder the way a shadow does, without announcement, without comment. A brush, a blot, a step back. The face is maintained the way a car is maintained, not because anyone is attached to it, but because it's on the schedule, and the schedule doesn't pause. You won't be home before 9 tonight. The chair will be waiting at 5 tomorrow. You are at Columbia by 6:30 for the Wednesday appointment. The appointment is not on the official call sheet. It is on a different paper, in a different office, and it does not have a name on the top, only an initial and a number. A nurse in a white coat shows you into a room with 1 chair and 1 machine, and you put your head back against a small headrest worn shiny by the heads that came before yours. 18 months, they said. You are on month 4. The machine has a needle. The needle has a current. The current finds a hair follicle and ends it. 1 follicle at a time, your hairline is being moved backward, millimeter by millimeter, over a 1.5 years of Wednesday mornings, because someone in a development meeting decided your forehead was too small. Not your forehead specifically, just the forehead that came with your face, which is now Columbia's face, which is now a line item in a conversation you were not in the room for. A technician named Gerald adjusts the lamp above you with the focused neutrality of a man reshelving books. He doesn't look at your face, he looks at the grid. There is a grid, a small chart clipped to a board, with dots marking the progress, which follicles have been retired, which are still active, which are scheduled for next week. The chart, frankly, has more confidence in itself than most documents in this building. Gerald marks a dot. Gerald moves the needle. Gerald marks another dot. You are, in some technical sense, a map being redrawn, and the chart, watching from its clipboard, approves. What Gerald is doing is permanent. The makeup comes off at the end of the day. The wig comes off. The corset loosens and you breathe correctly again, briefly, before the next fitting. The hairline doesn't come back. 18 months of Wednesday appointments, and the forehead that leaves this room is not the forehead that entered it in month 1. Rita Hayworth, the woman in the chair before you, was Rita Hayworth, and Rita Hayworth's original hairline does not survive the decade. The studio's preferred hairline does. The reasoning, delivered to you at some point by someone from publicity, is that it reads better on camera. Broader, more classical. Less, and here the word used was ethnic, though the sentence it arrived in was constructed carefully enough that you could pretend you hadn't heard it. You heard it. Columbia heard it first, probably, and agreed, and booked the room, and hired Gerald, and started the chart. Of course, the camera is not in this room. The camera is on stage 7. This room has a needle and a chart, and a headrest worn smooth by the specific weight of a head lying back and waiting for something to be finished with it. The camera will benefit from what happens here. The camera will not be listed on the appointment sheet. You will be back next Wednesday. The chart says so. Gerald folds it closed the way you'd close a grocery list, efficiently, without sentiment, because it's just the next thing on the list and the list is long. He sets it on the tray. He adjusts the lamp again. It's not a cruel room. That's almost the strangest part. It is a clean room with good lighting and a competent technician and a documented procedure, and it will take your hairline one careful dot at a time, and it will not raise its voice once. You stand on a small wooden box in your slip, while two women circle you with pins in their mouths. The wardrobe department has had your measurements since 1948, and they are written on a card in a wooden file box behind the door. The card and your body do not agree this morning. Edith Head is not here personally. Edith is across the lot, on a different production, but her assistant is here, and her assistant is the one who has to make the dress lie flat. The assistant's name is Patricia, and Patricia has a look she uses when the numbers are close but not quite. She makes the look now. She removes a pin from between her lips with the gravity of a field surgeon extracting shrapnel and holds it near your waist without yet committing. The other woman, her name is not offered and you don't ask, writes something on a clipboard and tilts her head slightly in your direction. Not at you, at your waist. There's a distinction. Let's talk about the dress. It's not a dress. It's a structural event. The long-line bra came first at 4:30 this morning, followed by the waist cincher, followed by the structured petticoat, followed by the thing Patricia is now attempting to close behind you in a series of small, load-bearing hook-and-eye fasteners that each require a kind of focused hostility to engage. When the last one catches, you feel your ribs make an editorial comment. You ignore it. So does Patricia. This is how the fitting goes. The waist cincher is doing approximately 20-inch work today. You know this because Patricia says, approvingly, 21, nearly, and writes that down. Nearly is the operative word. The fabric has a concept of what your waist should be, and it is pursuing that concept with the patient, focused conviction of a small parliament passing legislation about your ribcage. You breathe at the top of your lungs, not the bottom. The bottom has been taken off the table. Lana Turner did 30 takes in something like this once. Shallow inhalation through every one. The dress has opinions about how much you should hinge, and today its opinion is not at all. Patricia steps back and studies you the way a sculptor studies a piece that isn't quite done. She adjusts something near your left hip. The other woman writes it down. You are, in this moment, less a person in a room than a problem being solved on paper, which is basically how Hertz manages a Toyota Camry. Except the Camry doesn't have to hit its mark on the first take. The hem needs work. Patricia kneels, pins bristling from her lips like a very focused sea urchin, and begins the slow circuit at floor level. You stand perfectly still because moving would shift the hip seam, and then the clipboard woman writes something different, and then the card in the wooden file box gets updated, and then, 3 weeks from now, there's a conversation with the studio physician about your measurements, and nobody wants that conversation. 3 pounds is the threshold. The dietitian doesn't make appointments. She just appears. Patricia is not trying to hurt you. She is trying to make the costume work under arc lamps that burn at 100 degrees, in Technicolor, in front of a camera that flattens everything it sees and must therefore be given something already sculpted. She pinches a millimeter of fabric near the small of your back and tucks it under, and the cincher agrees to it the way a juror agrees to a verdict, quietly, professionally, and entirely without warmth. Patricia stands, steps back once more, and nods at the clipboard woman. The clipboard woman writes a final note. The note is brief, watchful, and quietly thorough. You don't ask what it says. The dress is flat. The card will be updated. You step down from the wooden box carefully, because the hem is still pinned, and because the waist cincher has taken a position on rapid movement, and that position is no. You step on the scale at 7:15 on a Monday, because Monday is weigh-in day at MGM, and Monday has been weigh-in day since you signed the paper. The dietitian is holding a clipboard. The clipboard has a column for last week, and a column for this week, and a column called Action, which is not a column you have ever asked about because asking would be a kind of admission. The needle settles. The dietitian writes a number. 3 pounds is the threshold. Not 10, not 15. 3 pounds, the amount you might retain after a Sunday dinner or a glass of water taken too close to bedtime, and the action column fills in. The dietitian doesn't announce this. She just writes, and the writing is its own announcement. The scale itself is flat, hard, and reliably affronted. It has been doing this longer than you have. It has no opinion about you personally. That's the unsettling part. Let's talk about what happens next. You don't go on a diet. Exactly. A diet implies you have made a decision. What happens is that someone adjusts the tray. The low-calorie options at the MGM commissary are placed at eye level, which is either a courtesy or a reminder depending on how you'd like to feel about it. A nutritional advisor, who answers to the studio, not to a physician, and certainly not to you, suggests a regimen. You follow it. The regimen has a name. The name sounds like a spa. It is not a spa. Meanwhile, the physician is also involved. Not your physician. The studio physician, who keeps an office near the production lot and carries a small case with the casual authority of someone who has never once been questioned about its contents. The case has compartments. The compartments are organized. He arrived the same way the craft services cart arrives, routinely, expected, just part of the morning. If the weigh-in produced an action, there's a good chance the case is part of the action. This is where Judy Garland enters the record. She's 15 when the pills begin. Amphetamines to suppress appetite, barbiturates to force sleep after the amphetamines have done their work, then amphetamines again the next morning to correct what the barbiturates did. The physician hands them to her. He is an adult in a white coat. She is 15 and on the MGM payroll and has been since she was 13. The pills are not hidden. They are administered. There's a difference, the studio would later suggest, and that difference is paperwork. A woman named Dorothy, studio dietitian, 11 years on staff, circles the commissary during lunch. She doesn't sit. She observes. She carries the clipboard the way a maitre d' carries a reservation book, with a pleasant expression that contains a great deal of information she isn't sharing. You order the consommé. Dorothy makes a small note. The consommé doesn't judge you. Dorothy's clipboard does, quietly, in the action column, in handwriting that is very neat. By the end of the week, you have lost the 3 pounds. You know this because you've been keeping track with the same attention most people reserve for things that actually matter to them. You step back on the scale Friday afternoon, the unofficial check-in, the one that isn't on the schedule but happens anyway, with the cautious optimism of a tenant approaching the mailbox after a difficult month. The needle lands where it should. The action column stays blank. This is the best possible outcome. You feel something adjacent to relief, which, if you think about it for more than 30 seconds, is a deeply strange thing to feel about a number. You are in your dressing room between setups when a man you have met 4 times this year knocks once and lets himself in. He is wearing a white coat that is not, strictly speaking, a doctor's coat. The buttons are wrong, and he is carrying a small leather case with a brass clasp. He asks how you're feeling. The question is not really a question. He has already opened the case and he is already counting the small white pills. He doesn't have a hospital. He has a studio extension, a payroll number, and a parking spot. The distinction matters to you and to no one who employs him. His job is to keep you working, not well, not rested, not healthy in any long-term structural sense, but upright and present for the 7 a.m. call sheet. The pills are amphetamines, and they are handed to you the way craft services hands you a Danish. You take them because the alternative is a conversation about your commitment, and you have already had that conversation once this month. Let's talk about the other pills. Those arrive in the evening, via the same case, the same man, the same knock. These are barbiturates. They are for sleep, which your body has largely forgotten how to achieve on its own since sometime around the 3rd month of production. The schedule is, wake at 3:45, swallow the first pill, sit in the makeup chair for 4 hours, shoot until 7 in the evening, return to the dressing room, swallow the second pill, sleep for 5 hours if the pill cooperates. The pill does not always cooperate. You lie in the dark feeling your heart beats slightly too fast, the way a ceiling fan sounds when one blade is slightly heavier than the others. Judy Garland was 15 when this started for her, not a contract clause, not a policy memo. Just a man with a case who knocked and came in and counted the pills, and a studio that needed its asset on set at dawn and asleep by 11. MGM had an opinion about her weight, her energy, her availability, and the hours during which she was permitted to be tired. The barbiturates were for the hours the amphetamines made unnavigable. It was, medically speaking, a closed loop. It was, contractually speaking, Tuesday. Now, nobody writes this down as pharmaceutical management. The production records list it as medical support, wellness consultation, on-set health services, the mid-century equivalent of a corporate wellness portal, except the portal dispenses Schedule 2 narcotics and answers to the line producer. The physician's notes, when they exist, describe the substances as prescribed. Prescribed by whom, for what condition, under what review process, the notes do not say. The notes have a lot going on. The notes are very busy. A man named Dr. Mark Rabwin was one of several MGM retained physicians during the Garland years. He is documented. He is not unusual. He is the whole point, that this wasn't aberration, it was infrastructure. Rabwin sets his case on the vanity table between your cold cream and your bobby pins. And he does not look at the bobby pins. He looks at you the way a mechanic looks at a car that has started making a noise. Professionally. Efficiently. Without much interest in what it's like to be the noise. The soundstage is waiting. The director has already been told you're almost ready. The Technicolor lamps are on and the temperature on the set is somewhere around 100 degrees, give or take the sincerity of whoever last checked the thermometer. You have a corset on under the costume and a wig over your pinned hair, and 4 hours of makeup between your actual face and the camera. The small white pill is doing what it does. Your hands are steady. Your appetite is not present. Somewhere behind your sternum, something is running slightly faster than it should. You head to set. The case clicks shut behind you. You eat lunch at 12:30 in the main commissary because being seen eating lunch at the main commissary is part of what they pay you for. There is a section for stars and a section for supporting players and a section behind a half wall for crew. The hostess does not ask where you'd like to sit. The hostess knows where you'd like to sit. The salad in front of you is selected by someone who has read your file. The file knows your current weight, your target weight, and the 3-pound gap between those two numbers that constitutes a formal situation. The low-calorie options are placed at eye level on the menu. The pasta is technically available. You have never seen anyone order it. Margaret, the supporting actress 2 tables over, is eating half a grapefruit and a glass of water with the focused commitment of someone defusing a bomb. You are not here to eat. You are here to be observed eating correctly, in the right section, wearing the right expression, at the right level of visible contentment. A fan magazine photographer has a standing arrangement with the commissary hostess. He doesn't need to announce himself. His camera already knows your angle. You chew slowly, carefully, and at the pace of someone being timed. You don't reach for the bread. A publicist named Gerald Holt stops by your table, pats the back of your chair without touching you, and says something warm and hollow about your last picture. He is making a note. Not physically, but he is making a note. Of course, you are hungry. You have been awake since 4 in the morning. The amphetamine from the physician's case has been suppressing your appetite since 6, which makes the hunger theoretical but also structural. It's there, operating at some lower altitude where you're not quite allowed to visit it. The salad does not fix this. The salad acknowledges it. The commissary is stratified the way a coral reef is stratified, each level occupying the precise depth its biology permits, everything organized by pressure. The stars section has tablecloths. The supporting section has paper placemats. The crew section, behind the half wall, has a different menu and a different silence. You have been in all 3 sections at different points in your career. The tablecloth section is quieter. Everyone in it is performing composure. A wardrobe assistant named Dorothy, small and quick, appears beside your table and leans down to say something in a voice that is technically private but is not actually private. She tells you that your costume fitting for the Thursday shoot has been moved to 6 a.m. You say thank you. Dorothy disappears with the efficiency of someone who has learned not to linger near stars at lunch, because lingering near stars at lunch is the kind of thing that ends up in a column. The columns are everywhere and nowhere. Hedda Hopper's office is not in this building. It doesn't need to be. One of the producers eats lunch here 4 days a week and has her home number. You eat your salad. The salad is not today a salad. The salad is a report. The salad has an opinion about this situation, and the opinion is, finish me and say nothing. You step onto stage 5 at 9, and the heat hits your face like an oven door opening. The Technicolor process needs 3 times the light a black and white setup needs, which means the arc lamps overhead are running at a temperature. The script supervisor's thermometer no longer registers honestly. You are wearing a wool dress, a long line bra, a waist cincher, and a wig pinned at 12 points. The thermometer says 96. The room knows it's lying. The arc lamps are carbon rod. When they run long enough, the rods burn down and someone has to swap them out. And during that window, the stage cools by approximately 3 degrees, which is the closest thing to weather you'll experience today. The smell is sawdust and grease paint and the particular chemical signature of burnt carbon, which sits at the back of your throat like a guest who has long overstayed but doesn't own shoes. You breathe through it, shallowly. The waste cincture has the structural integrity of a small medieval city wall and approximately the same opinion about being negotiated with. Lana Turner's listed measurement for the corset log is 20 inches. Yours is close. The costume department keeps a ledger the same way the weigh-in room keeps a ledger, because in 1953, every dimension of you is a production asset with a number assigned to it. The cincture was laced at 6:30 this morning, tightened once at 7:15, and it hasn't been touched since. You've learned to breathe at the top of your lungs only, a shallow flutter that keeps the costume happy and your diaphragm out of the conversation entirely. This is not a problem anyone in the room names out loud. It is simply how the take goes. A single carbon arc lamp throws enough heat to crisp the eyelashes it's technically being paid to flatter. A Technicolor rig is not one lamp. It is several, arranged, optimized, and aimed directly at your face from a distance that a fire marshal, had one been present, would have found interesting. OSHA doesn't exist yet. It won't until 1971. Until then, the light is the light, and you stand in it. The camera operator, a man named Roy with a handkerchief perpetually folded in his left breast pocket, adjusts the rig by 2 degrees and checks his light meter. Roy is not checking whether you're comfortable. Roy is checking the Kelvin. These are not the same question. He folds the handkerchief back without looking at you and says, "Good." He means the light. Now the director calls for the setup again. This is take 11 of a scene that runs 45 seconds. Otto Preminger, on the St. Joan set 4 years from now, will document himself requiring 30 or 40 takes as a deliberate pressure method. But the principle is older than Preminger. Takes accumulate. The lamps stay on between them, because resetting the lights costs time and time costs money, and you are, per the balance sheet, a capital expenditure with a shooting schedule attached. The stage does not cool between takes. You do not sit down between takes. You stand in the heat with your diaphragm held hostage and you wait for the word. By noon, the stage is over 100 degrees and the lamps overhead are technically the size of a small refrigerator each. Your makeup is being touched up by a woman named Doris, who works from a tray and does not make eye contact, which is its own professional discipline. She blots. She reapplies. The wig, pinned at 12 points, has developed its own internal climate. Doris does not comment on this either. She caps the powder, steps back and says, "Good." She also means the light. You have been here since 4 in the morning. The makeup chair alone was 3.5 hours. The transformation that happened in that chair, the reshaping of your brows, the contouring of your jaw, the foundation layered to a finish that reads correctly under carbon arc and nowhere else, has been running on your face for 9 hours now, in heat that a casserole would recognize as familiar. You have 4 hours left in your day, assuming the setup cooperates. The setup has not historically cooperated. You are on the St. Joan set in Shepperton, and the director has just asked for take 23. He is not screaming yet. The screaming comes between take 26 and take 28 by a calendar he keeps in his head. You hit your mark. You speak the line. The crew has stopped looking at you because the crew has learned that looking at you when this is happening is a way of participating that none of them want to participate in. Otto Preminger is documented. Gene Seberg and others describe the St. Joan production in enough detail that 30 and 40 takes of a single scene exist on record, not as rumour, but as method. Preminger doesn't dispute it. He frames it as craft. You are 19 years old, you have never made a film before, and a man with an Oscar nomination is explaining to a closed soundstage that your failure to hit the line correctly on the 24th attempt is a spiritual deficiency. Take 35 does not cost you the line. You know the line. You knew the line on take 4. Take 35 costs you the thing that makes you useful on takes 1 through 10, the thing that reads as presence on camera, the quality, the casting notice described as luminous, radiant, and effortless. By take 35, luminous has left the building. What's left is a face that is trying very hard not to look like it is trying very hard. The camera sees the effort. The effort is not the film Preminger is making. A camera operator named Gerald Turpin is adjusting his eyepiece with the specific focus of a man who has found something extremely important in the middle distance. Gerald has been examining the middle distance for 40 minutes. The middle distance is, to its credit, holding up well. The script supervisor has her pencil down. Nobody is counting aloud anymore because someone counted aloud once and Preminger looked at them, and after that nobody counted aloud. Preminger is not unique. He is the documented case. He has the receipts, the testimony, and the paper trail. You, sitting in the chair opposite him, have no right of refusal. You can't walk off the soundstage. The contract was very clear on that point when you signed it, and it has not become less clear in the 7 months since. You're not in that chair opposite him because you admire his process. You're in it because the studio loaned you to this production, took a markup on your rate, and informed you of the arrangement afterward. The loan-out letter was a paragraph long. Your opinion of the paragraph was not addressed anywhere in the paragraph. The continuity supervisor handed it to you on a Friday and walked away before you finished reading. By take 38, the soundstage has developed the specific atmosphere of a room where everyone is pretending a smell isn't there. Not sawdust, not carbon rod, not grease paint. This smell is social. It's the accumulated weight of watching something happen to someone and having correctly calculated that saying so costs more than silence. The crew has done this math quickly and correctly. They are professionals. You do take 39. You hit the mark. You speak the line. Preminger watches the playback with the unhurried expression of a man checking a restaurant bill for errors he has already found. He doesn't call cut so much as allow the scene to stop existing. Tomorrow, the call sheet says 6 a.m. It will say 6 a.m., the way it always says 6 a.m. The number doesn't negotiate. You break for 45 minutes at 11, and you spend the 45 minutes with a woman named Margaret in a small room off stage 9. Margaret has a list of vowels you are not allowed to make anymore. She has another list of consonants you are not allowed to soften. Margaret was hired in 1939 to remove a Brooklyn accent from a different actress, and Margaret has been removing accents from a steady stream of women ever since. Your accent is on the list. Margaret does not say your original voice is wrong. She says it is unresolved. She says this with the practiced gentleness of someone who has been paid to say it since the Roosevelt administration. She has a small tape recorder, one of the newer ones, about the size of a hat box, and she plays your voice back to you with the same expression a dentist uses when pointing at an X-ray. The X-ray is bad. The X-ray is always bad. You were not told what it was supposed to look like before they handed you one. The list, when she finally turns it toward you, is long, flat, and uncompromising. The way you say coffee, the way you say water, the dropped R in the middle of anything. Margaret circles them in red pencil on a small card and places the card in a manila folder with your name typed on the tab, and that folder goes into a filing cabinet with other folders, all typed, all alphabetical. There's an entire drawer of women who used to sound like something specific and now sound like a mid-range approximation of nowhere. The drawer is labelled "In Progress." Margaret taps the table when you get something right. She does not tap the table often. She taps it once and looks away immediately, like she doesn't want you to get attached to the feedback. You repeat the phrase, "I cannot imagine a more beautiful evening," and somewhere between the second and third repetition the sentence starts to feel like it belongs to somebody else. That's the point. That's always the point. Margaret keeps her own schedule. She knows your 11 o'clock by heart, the way a dentist knows a cavity. Across the lot at the same hour, an MGM esthetician is plucking Elizabeth Taylor's brows into a line. Taylor is 12, the esthetician is salaried, and the appointment shows up on the production calendar between camera tests and a story meeting. Margaret's appointment shows up next to that one. Both appointments are coaching, by the studio's vocabulary. Both have been cleared with your producer. Neither has been cleared with you. Of course, the voice work doesn't stop at accents. Margaret also handles pitch. Lower is preferred. Lower reads as authority, or as the particular variety of softness the era finds authoritative. You do breathing exercises designed to drop your register by half a tone. You hum into your sternum. The room is the size of a generous closet and smells of cold coffee and the particular staleness of a space where difficult information is delivered calmly, repeatedly, to people who have nowhere else to be. Outside, through a wall thin enough to transmit footsteps, the set is being reset for the afternoon shoot. Grips call to each other. Someone drags something metal. The carbon arc lamps hum at a frequency that you can feel more than hear, a low institutional vibration the building has absorbed so completely that it now produces it independently. Margaret asks you to repeat the phrase again. You repeat the phrase. She makes a small mark on the card. The mark is not the tap. You know the difference. By the time you've been in the system 2 years, the original sound is genuinely harder to find on the tape. Not gone, just receding. Margaret taps the table once. Margaret looks away. The red pencil goes back into the small ceramic cup beside the manila folder, where it lives between appointments and where, for the foreseeable Tuesday at 11, it will continue to live. You sit in your folding chair in the gap between takes, and a person you would describe as a nurse, if pressed, sets a small paper cup on the arm of the chair. The cup has one pill in it. The pill is for staying awake. There is a second cup that comes at the end of the day, when you are in your dressing room removing the wig and the false eyelashes, and the second cup has a different pill in it. The second pill is for sleeping. The person who delivers both cups answers to payroll. Not to a hospital, not to a licensing board. The small case he carries is shiny, neat, and reliably stocked. It opens like a doctor's bag and closes like a doctor's bag and is, in every respect except the relevant one, a doctor's bag. Judy Garland is 15 when the cups start arriving. MGM has a production schedule, and Judy Garland has a body that requires maintenance between shoots, meaning sleep it doesn't have time for, and energy it doesn't have left. The amphetamines handle the first problem, the barbiturates handle the second. The studio physician handles both, and his employer handles him. The cups keep coming for years. Not because anyone decides to continue them, because nobody decides to stop. The amphetamines suppress appetite, which solves the weigh-in problem and the camera problem simultaneously. 2 problems, 1 pill, no paperwork. The dietitian makes a smaller note than usual. The studio finds this efficient. It is, by the accounting logic of the balance sheet, a very clean solution. Lana Turner is being corseted to 20 inches on a different soundstage. Rita Hayworth is in her 18th month of electrolysis appointments, the hairline moving millimetre by millimetre toward a face that Columbia has decided is the correct one. The diction coach is waiting in a rehearsal room. The esthetician adjusted your brows last Thursday. Margaret in payroll has all 4 appointments on the same buff-coloured card, in the same neat handwriting, filed in the same metal drawer behind her desk. A man named Gerald, not a doctor, though he carries himself like the idea of one, stops at your chair between the 3rd and 4th setup of the afternoon. He sets the cup down without making eye contact. He picks up the empty cup from the last stop. He moves to the next chair. The brass clasp on Gerald's case has a small dent in it that he has, over the years, developed an affection for, the way a person develops an affection for a chipped mug. Gerald has done this on 4 productions. He will do it on 6 more. He has the unhurried efficiency of someone delivering something very ordinary, which is exactly what this is. The cart arrives, the cup arrives, you take the pill, the camera rolls, Gerald's case clicks shut 3 chairs over before you finish the cup, and then a 4th, and then a 5th, and then the next setup begins. You finish the day, the wig comes off, the false eyelashes go into a small labelled tray because props will need them tomorrow. You are sitting in the dressing room chair when Gerald appears in the doorway. He doesn't knock, exactly. He's already inside. The second cup is on the vanity before you've asked for it. You take the second pill. The soundstage outside is going dark. The carbon arc lamps are cooling. That specific smell of burnt rod and grease paint and sawdust and your own sweat underneath 4 hours of costuming. The call sheet for tomorrow is already taped to your mirror. It says 4 a.m. The pill is for sleeping. You will need it. You wrap at 9:45 on a Thursday, and your call the next morning is at 4. The Screen Actors Guild negotiated a 12-hour turnaround in 1947, and you are aware of this because somebody told you once, on a different production, in a different year. Tonight's production is on location, which means the 12-hour rule does not apply by a definition of location that the studio's lawyers have explored thoroughly. You will sleep, by the studio's calendar, for 4 hours and 42 minutes. The driver picks you up at 3:40. You are already in the car before you've finished deciding whether you were ever actually asleep. The town outside the window is dark in that specific way that suggests the rest of the world has made different and better decisions. You arrive at the location makeup tent, which is a trailer with a folding chair and a woman named Iris who has been there since 2:30 and has strong opinions about concealer and no opinion at all about the hour. Iris doesn't ask how you slept. She can see how you slept. She tilts your face up with 2 fingers under your chin, assesses the situation with the calm of a contractor reviewing storm damage, and begins. The foundation goes on in layers. Each one dries a little. The arc lights will do the rest, which means by the time you're on set, you're wearing roughly the same amount of material as a Venetian plaster wall, applied with the same intention of hiding what's underneath. The arc lights are carbon rods, 2 of them, facing each other, generating light by means of an electrical arc hot enough to crisp the eyelashes it was paid to flatter. They're used because Technicolor requires them, because Technicolor's chemical process needs a specific color temperature and a specific brightness that incandescent lights cannot produce. What Technicolor does not require, but what the arc lights provide anyway, is a closed soundstage at 107 degrees Fahrenheit. You are standing in that stage in a corset, a structured petticoat, a wig weighing roughly the same as a Yorkshire Terrier, and 4 layers of period-correct costuming. You are not permitted to sweat visibly. You sweat invisibly, which is worse, because it stays there. The call sheet lists 14 setups for today. Otto Preminger, on the 1957 St. John's set, averaged 30 to 40 takes per setup on the scenes he considered emotionally insufficient, which was most of them. Jean Seberg described standing in front of the camera until her legs shook, then standing some more, while Preminger watched from his chair with the patient expression of someone running an extremely unpleasant experiment. Today's director isn't Preminger. Today's director is a man named Phil who says, "Beautiful, beautiful," after every take, regardless of what happened, which is somehow almost as exhausting. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 12 hours into the day that started at 4 o'clock in the morning, your vision narrows slightly at the edges. Your marks on the floor begin to look like suggestions. A grip named Walter notices and hands you a cup of coffee with the wordless efficiency of a man who has done this before. The coffee is bitter, lukewarm, and only theoretically coffee. You drink all of it. Walter nods, which is as much acknowledgement as the situation will get. The SAG contract stipulates meal breaks. The production provides them, technically, in the form of a 15-minute window at 1:30 that the first assistant director announces by shouting "lunch" in a tone that implies he considers the word aspirational. The commissary on location is a folding table with sandwiches. The sandwiches have been there since 11. They are not complaining about this. They have simply become part of the location. You wrap at 9:15. The driver is waiting. He has a thermos and doesn't speak, which are the 2 qualities you would list on a job posting if you were hiring for this role. The call sheet for tomorrow is already on the seat beside you. Your call is at 4:15. The studio's lawyers have reviewed this gap. They find it adequate. You sign the contract on a Tuesday in 1949 when you are 19. The contract is 41 pages long, and you read pages 1 through 3 carefully, and pages 4 through 41 in the way that 19-year-olds read 41-page contracts. The contract uses the word option in exactly 7 distinct paragraphs. The option, in every paragraph, belongs to the studio. The 7-year term, you will learn later, is a description of the studio's commitment to you, not of your commitment to them, though you are not legally allowed to phrase it that way to anyone in writing. The talent liaison who signs your suspension letter does it in green ink. Margaret in business affairs uses blue, the talent liaison uses green, and you will learn to recognize an envelope by the color of the signature before you've opened it. The 1944 Olivia de Havilland decision ruled that California law couldn't let suspensions extend a contract past 7 years. That ruling made the trades. It sounded like a door opening. The studio legal department read it on a Friday and by Monday had written language that accomplished the same outcome using different words. The new contracts had fewer suspensions. They had more initial restrictions, longer penalty periods, lower renegotiation floors. The door didn't open. It just got a different handle. In the spring of 1951, a production coordinator named Gerald hands you a call sheet with a different studio logo on it. Universal, not your studio. Gerald doesn't make eye contact. The call sheet has your name spelled correctly, at least. The badge clipped to Gerald's lanyard is from a third studio entirely, which you don't ask about and which Gerald on principle doesn't volunteer. The loan-out works like this. The studio charges the borrowing studio 1 rate. You receive another rate. The difference goes into a column that doesn't have your name on it. You don't negotiate the loan. You don't know the terms until it's done. Gerald hands you the call sheet and turns back to whatever he was doing, which is, today, nothing visible. Now, the morality clause. It occupies 4 paragraphs on pages 31 through 34, which you didn't read on the Tuesday you were 19. The clause lists moral turpitude as grounds for termination. Moral turpitude is not further defined. It doesn't need to be. It means whatever the studio decides it means on the day it needs to mean it. Homosexuality qualifies. A public pregnancy qualifies. A leftist acquaintance who was photographed at the wrong party in 1947 qualifies. The clause has the structural flexibility of a fishing net, wide enough to catch almost anything, fine-meshed enough to hold it. Marjorie Finch, a studio-registered contract player, not a name you'd know, signs her version of this document in 1952, sits down in the chair across from the talent liaison, and asks one question about the option structure. The liaison smiles, uncaps a pen, and slides the signature page 2 inches closer across the desk. Marjorie picks up the pen. The liaison's hand is already moving toward the intercom before the ink is dry. By 1953, you are in year 5 of a 7-year contract. You have been suspended once, for 6 weeks. After declining a role you were medically advised to decline. The 6 weeks do not appear on Margaret's green ledger sheet at the end of the year, except as a small notation in her own handwriting that she would not show you if asked. The studio's commitment to you remains, as described on page 1, 7 years. You refuse a role on a Monday. The role is in a film you have already turned down twice, written by a man you have already met once, and the studio sends a 1-page letter to your agent on Wednesday explaining that you are now on suspension. Suspension means 3 things. It means you are not paid this week. It means the 7-year clock on your contract has stopped. It means that whenever the clock starts again, the time you've already served does not count. The letter is very short for what it contains. There's no negotiation section. There's no appeal process outlined. There's a signature at the bottom from someone in business affairs whose name you don't recognize, which is how you know the decision was made before the letter was typed. The clock was already your least favorite feature of the contract. A 7-year term the studio could pause at will while your bills continued on their original schedule. The rent doesn't suspend. The rent has no concept of labor disputes. Groceries continue to carry prices. Your driver, if you still have one, still expects to be paid on Friday. Bettina Moore, a contract player at a mid-tier studio, name in the credits but not above the title, sits across from her agent in a Wilshire Boulevard office on a Thursday afternoon and learns that her suspension, which started in October, he will push her 7-year deal past the spring of 1955. She sets down her coffee with the practiced calm of a hostage negotiator. It is, at this point, mostly lipstick. The agent adjusts his cufflink as if the cufflink had personally requested it. Neither of them says the obvious thing, which is that they both knew this was a possibility, and both assumed it wouldn't happen to her specifically. Now, the suspension is also a message. 3 weeks in, you start receiving information through unofficial channels. A friend at the studio, a casting assistant you once sat next to at a table read, that the role you refused has been offered to someone else, and the someone else said yes immediately, and the studio is pleased with how quickly this was resolved. The information arrives in the tone of casual gossip. It isn't casual. It's the kind of gossip that has an origin and a destination, and knows both. Hedda Hopper types 3 sentences about your suspension into her column on a Tuesday with the focused efficiency of a tax assessor. She doesn't call it a suspension. She calls it a creative difference, which is the journalistic equivalent of a compliment that lands on your doorstep like a small, polite, paid invoice. The column is read by producers at 4 studios before lunch. By the afternoon, 2 of them have made quiet notes in files you'll never see. Bettina is not fired. Bettina is paused. The studio still owns her name, her likeness, her contractual exclusivity. She can't sign with another studio. She can't do a radio appearance without approval. She can't take a stage engagement in New York without a written release that nobody is currently motivated to issue. She exists in a specific kind of professional amber, preserved, controlled, and not working. The clock sits. The bills don't. You come back. You arrive on Monday at a studio that is not your studio. The studio that is your studio has rented you to this one for the duration of a single picture, at a weekly rate the 2 studios have negotiated in a room you are not in. The rate is significantly higher than your contracted weekly salary. The difference is kept by the studio that owns you. You learn about the difference 6 years later, in a deposition for a different lawsuit. The loan out is basically Uber Eats taking 40%, except the meal also has a SAG card and a dressing room that smells like the previous actress's cold cream. Nobody asks whether you want to be loaned. Nobody consults your schedule. A memo moves between two studios, two executives shake hands over a lunch neither of them ate, and on Monday morning you report to a soundstage you've never been to and introduce yourself to a crew that already knows your measurements from a file your home studio faxed over. Almost nothing changes. The call time is the same 4 o'clock. The makeup chair is the same chair in a different building, operated by a different woman who immediately begins correcting what the last woman did. The script has a different title. The director has a different name. The director, in this case, has opinions about your face that your home studio's director also had, but these opinions are expressed more loudly because this director doesn't have to return you in good condition, he just has to return you. A woman named Phyllis, the lone studio's continuity supervisor, hands you a call sheet and watches you read it with the focused attention of someone who has seen people react to call sheets before and finds the reactions instructive. You are on set at 6. You are in the makeup chair at 4. You are expected at the fitting at 2 in the afternoon, which is today, which is an hour from now, which is before anyone has told you where the fitting room is. Phyllis turns and walks away with the focused, efficient, and entirely impersonal pace of someone whose afternoon does not contain you. The call sheet doesn't say, "Phyllis, your home studio's loan-out coordinator, negotiated the deal to protect the investment, not you." The loan agreement specifies that you're to be treated according to your contracted terms, 12-hour days. The turnaround SAG technically requires between shoot days. In practice, the loan studio treats these terms as guidelines. They've paid a premium for you. They intend to use you. The SAG turnaround is 12 hours on paper and 9 hours on location, which this picture, as of yesterday, has reclassified as a location shoot. The location is a soundstage in Burbank. Burbank is 20 minutes from the previous soundstage. None of the markup travels with you. Your home studio collects the difference between your weekly salary and the loan rate, sometimes twice what they pay you, occasionally more, and deposits it into an accounting line the bookkeeper, a quiet woman named Edith, types out in green ink. Edith works in a windowless room above the executive parking garage. Edith has never met you and never will. The line in her ledger that represents your spread is not the line that represents your salary, and the two lines do not speak. Marilyn Monroe's loan-out terms to various productions in the early 50s followed exactly this structure. Fox collected the spread. Monroe collected her contracted $1,500 a week and the continued privilege of being a Fox asset on Fox's balance sheet, which is less glamorous than it sounds and also exactly as glamorous as it sounds, depending on which end of the balance sheet you're reading from. By Wednesday, you know where the fitting room is. You know which coffee urn has the hot coffee and which one has the coffee that has been hot since before you arrived. You know that the gaffer on this picture has a nickname that is not his name and that you should call him by the nickname or he'll take a long time adjusting the light above your mark. You know that the director wants 3 takes minimum and 14 takes when he's frustrated, and that frustrated is his default condition before noon. You are learning the grammar of a building that doesn't belong to you, administered by a studio that rented you, for a picture that you'll promote as though you chose it. You didn't choose it. A memo chose it. The memo has already been filed. You read the morality clause once, on the day you signed, and then never again until the morning your publicist calls and tells you to read it again. The morality clause says the studio may terminate you for conduct that brings the studio into disrepute. The clause does not define disrepute. The clause does not need to. The studio, in any disagreement about the meaning of the word, is the one who decides what the word means. The clause covers quite a lot. Divorce covers it, in the right climate. A photograph in the wrong location covers it. Being seen with the wrong person covers it. Being the wrong kind of person, privately, covers it absolutely. The clause lists no examples, which is how it manages to mean everything simultaneously. It's a very efficient clause. One sentence. Total jurisdiction. The morality clause is technically a single sentence that would be illegal in several countries if anyone could be bothered to translate it. The clause covers homosexuality with the polite, surgical, and absolutely deniable language the studio prefers. Your file knows. It has known since your first screen test, when the casting director filed a note that used a word that doesn't appear in the note anymore because someone removed it. The note is gone. The clause is not. You attend the premiere on the arm of someone whose contract also requires him to be at premieres on arms. You smile for the camera. He smiles for the camera. The photographer from Photoplay gets the shot he was told to get. Everyone is cooperative. Everyone is professional. The car ride home is very quiet. You watched it happen to Ingrid Bergman. You were at Paramount's commissary the morning the Hopper column ran, and you watched 3 different producers fold the same newspaper the same way before lunch. Bergman left her husband for Roberto Rossellini in 1949, which wasn't a contract violation. It was a coverage decision made by people who didn't consult Bergman and weren't going to consult you either. Hopper was at her typewriter by 9 in the morning with one of 2 telephones in Hollywood that could end a career before the commissary opened. By the time the column ran, the studio had issued no comment, which was its own kind of comment. Bergman didn't work in Hollywood for 7 years. The clause never needed to be invoked. Invoking it would have required paperwork. You watched it happen to Anne Revere. You stood next to her at a SAG meeting in 1949 and she had been kind to you about a line reading. Revere won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress in 1945 for National Velvet. By 1951, after she refused to name names before HUAC, her film career was over. The morality clause says conduct bringing the studio into disrepute. Refusing to cooperate with a congressional committee is, by studio logic, conduct. The clause agrees. The clause always agrees, patiently, professionally, and without ever quite looking up. A studio publicist named Gerald, not his real name, nobody uses real names, hands you a typed page with 3 talking points and tells you that if a columnist calls, you read from the page, you don't add to the page, and you don't answer the question that wasn't on the page. He sets the page on your dressing table, smooths it flat with the side of his hand, and leaves without saying goodbye. The page is a courtesy. The clause is not, and you knew about Loretta Young. Everyone in this building knew about Loretta Young. Young gave birth in 1935, vanished from Hollywood for several months, and returned. 18 months later, she adopted an infant daughter. The gossip columnists received a story about a generous woman opening her home to an orphan child. Luella Parsons ran it warm and brief. The fiction held for decades. Nobody invoked the morality clause because the morality clause never had to hear about it. The morality clause, like a well-trained dog, only barks at strangers. You close the contract. The clause is on page 4, 3rd paragraph, 11 lines, shorter than your billing requirements, longer than your termination notice. You don't reread it. There's no version of rereading it that ends well for you, and you already know what it says. It says the studio decides. It has always said that. It will keep saying it until there's no studio left to say it. You meet your publicist for breakfast at the Brown Derby at 8:15 on a Saturday morning. The publicist orders for both of you, because the publicist has read the dietitian's note. He has a manila folder under his elbow with your name on it. The folder is not, technically, a folder. The folder is a quarterly assessment. Inside it are 7 typed pages describing who you have been seen with, who you should be seen with, and which of these 2 lists is the longer. The publicist does not call this a problem. He calls it a project. The Brown Derby is not neutral territory. Every booth has a sightline and a reputation, and your publicist has chosen the one that puts your left profile toward the door. He has done this the way a chess player moves a piece without commentary, as though the chair simply happened to be there. You are photographed twice before the coffee arrives. Neither photographer announces himself. Your publicist nods at both of them the way you nod at a reliable appliance. The photograph isn't a photograph. It's a placement. The picture of you at the Brown Derby eating a sensible breakfast with appropriate posture will appear in Photoplay or Modern Screen within 10 days, captioned with something warm and slightly aspirational. The caption was written before you sat down. Your publicist may have written it himself, or it may have come from the studio's publicity department on a sheet of paper that travelled the same internal mail route as your weigh-in report. Either way, it exists before the food does. Marjorie at Photoplay handed your publicist a typed quote sheet last Tuesday in a booth on Vine Street. Your publicist read it, made one penciled correction, handed it back, and ordered another coffee. The corrected version ran in Photoplay's June issue, attributed to you, 3 weeks before you saw the magazine. Across town, Hedda Hopper was typing something similar at her own desk, receiver of one of the 2 phones in Hollywood that could end a career by lunch, for an audience of roughly 2 million readers who took her byline at face value. Your publicist slides a typed sheet across the table. It lists 3 men. One of them is an actor whose own publicist has slid a similar sheet across a similar table this morning. You don't know him well. You've met him at a premiere and once in a studio commissary, where he was sitting in the section that meant he was doing fine but not spectacularly. The publicist explains that the 2 of you will be photographed at Chasen's next Friday and that you should look comfortable, not infatuated. Infatuated is too much. The publicist uses the word relaxed. He means something precise by it. Sylvia, a unit publicist who handles 3 of you simultaneously, is already at Chasen's now, or will be by Thursday, confirming the booth, the lighting, and which photographers have been notified. Sylvia carries a leather-bound diary that she holds against her chest when she walks, pressed there like a document she's about to submit to someone. She will not be at the dinner. She will have arranged every visible inch of it. The 7 pages in your publicist's folder include a section on what you've said in recent interviews about marriage, which is reviewed the way a lawyer reviews a prior deposition. You said someday in photoplay 4 months ago. You said not yet to Modern Screen in March. The publicist has circled both quotes in soft, careful, and entirely legible pencil and drawn a small line connecting them. The line has a question mark at the end. The question mark means these need to align. They don't, quite. You eat the eggs. They're the right eggs, the dietitian's eggs, ordered by your publicist on your behalf from a menu he knows better than you do at this point. They're fine. You're not hungry, because your call time yesterday was 4:15, and you ate something at craft services at 7 am, and something else at a table that was technically lunch but happened at 10:30, and your body has stopped organising meals by name and started organising them by proximity to the next costume fitting. The publicist closes the folder. He picks up his coffee. He says something reassuring that contains no reassuring information, which is the publicist's core professional skill, the warm delivery of content-free confidence. You nod. Outside, through the Derby's window, a photographer with a long lens is adjusting his angle from 40 feet away, trying to catch the left profile your publicist arranged for him 20 minutes ago, patient as a man who has always been paid to wait. You arrive at Ciro's at 8 on a Friday with a man you met for the first time in the studio's publicity office that afternoon. The man is, by occupation, a contract actor at the same studio. The photographers are already on the sidewalk. They are already in position. You take his arm at the precise angle the publicist demonstrated, which is the angle at which his face and your face are both visible above the line of the car door. The flashbulbs begin. His name is either Robert or James. You're fairly certain it's James. The studio sent a typed card with his name and 2 facts about him, his hometown and the picture he has coming out in March, so you'd have something to say in the car. You said the thing about March. He said something back. The car pulled up to the entrance, and the conversation ended in the way conversations end, when the point of the conversation was the arrival, not the conversation. Ciro's on a Friday night is less a restaurant than a filing system. The maitre d', a man named Henri who has never once been surprised by anything, knows exactly which table photographs cleanly from the sidewalk window and which tables are for people the studio is currently cooling on. You are seated at a window table. This is good news. You sit with your back straight because Sylvia mentioned last Thursday that someone turned in a photograph of you sitting with your back not straight, and it ran in a column with a caption that used the word tired. You do. Not look tired. You never look tired. You are exhausted. The menu arrives. You already know what you're ordering because Pat decided it on a Tuesday. Pat is the studio dietitian, a cheerful woman with the energy of someone who has never personally experienced hunger. She sent a card to the maitre last week with 3 acceptable options pre-selected: a protein, something green, nothing with a sauce, and a small note, in her own handwriting, that thanked Henri for his continued cooperation. Henri keeps the card in the same small wooden box where he keeps the cards for 9 other studio actresses, alphabetized by last name, including one woman who is currently in Italy. He hasn't removed her card. Pat would notice. Across the room, a photographer from Modern Screen is positioned near the bar with a press credential and a very specific understanding of his assignment. He isn't there to capture a candid moment. There are no candid moments at Ciro's on a Friday. He's there to capture the moment that has been scripted to resemble a candid moment, which is you leaning slightly toward James or Robert during the entree course, laughing at something he has just said. The lean is calculated, rehearsed, and reliably photogenic. You will lean. He will have said something. The photograph will run in 6 weeks under a headline using the word romance. The publicist will clip it and file it. The file has a name on it. The name is yours. James orders the steak without consulting anyone. You register this with mild envy. He eats the bread. You watch the bread with the focused neutrality of a person who has made peace with something and hasn't. He is handsome in the way the studio requires him to be handsome. Jaw, hair, a shirt that fits as if a costume designer approved it, which she did. His screen test was 6 months ago. His contract runs through 1958. You two have almost nothing in common except the studio, the contract, and the fact that both of you will be in a car back to your respective addresses by 11 because the publicity office specified 11. Of course, you order the acceptable thing. The plate arrives. You eat with the posture of someone being photographed, because you are. The photographer near the bar shifts 2 degrees to the left. You notice. You don't react. You learned not to react to the shift about 8 months into your contract, around the same time you stopped noticing the mirrors. Your phone rings at 11:15 on a Tuesday morning, and the housekeeper picks it up because that is what the housekeeper is for. She comes into the room you are reading in and she says, very quietly, that it is Mrs. Hopper. You take the call standing. You take every call from Mrs. Hopper standing. Hedda has a story she has heard from a source she will not name, and she would very much like you to confirm it for her column tomorrow morning. 2 phones in Hollywood could end your career before lunch. One belonged to Hedda Hopper, the other belonged to Luella Parsons. They did not like each other. They did not have to. The town was large enough for 2 women who could each, independently, end you, and they both understood this arrangement with professional clarity. Hedda is calling because someone talked. It may have been your publicity office. It may have been a director's assistant with a side arrangement. It may have been the housekeeper standing 8 feet away doing a very good impression of a person who is not listening. The source doesn't matter. What matters is that Hedda has the story, and she is asking you to confirm it, which is not actually a request. A request can be declined. This is something else. This is Hedda Hopper holding the phone in one hand and her column deadline in the other, and both items are ticking. The story she has is one of 3 things. It is either true, in which case you deny it pleasantly. It is false, in which case you also deny it pleasantly. Or it is approximately true, meaning it is based on something real that has been lightly adjusted to be more interesting than the real version, and you deny that one with the most warmth of all because that one requires the most careful handling. You have done this before. You have a voice for it. It sounds like a woman with nothing to hide and a busy afternoon ahead. Now, Hedda is not operating alone. This is not journalism. This is, at best, a brand deal TikTok creator, except the brand is your entire reputation and the contract is verbal and was agreed to before you arrived in the room. What Hedda receives from the studios is access, first calls, confirmed arrivals, confirmed departures, the official version of whatever story is being released this week. What the studios receive from Hedda is coverage that runs the studio's preferred narrative with a byline attached. Margaret, your publicist, has a direct line to Hedda's assistant. Margaret has probably already called. Margaret always calls first. Hedda writes her column on a typewriter in a house in Beverly Hills with 2 separate telephone lines, and she answers both of them herself because she trusts no one to take a message correctly, which is understandable when your entire professional operation depends on the gap between what was said and what gets printed. She is also wearing a hat. Hedda Hopper is always wearing a hat. The hat is not ironic. The hat is load-bearing. You confirm a version of the story. It is the studio-approved version, which Margaret had ready before Hedda dialed. You describe it as a delightful, harmless, and almost entirely fictional misunderstanding, which is a phrase that covers a remarkable range of situations. Hedda reads it back to you, and you say, yes, that's exactly right, which is something you have learned to say with complete conviction regardless of whether it is exactly right. The column runs tomorrow. The column will describe you as radiant, or grounded, or increasingly mature, depending on which adjective the publicity department has flagged as current for you this quarter. Across town, Luella Parsons is doing the same thing on a different typewriter. She has her own source network, a casting director at Paramount, a script supervisor at MGM, a former producer's wife on the West Side who likes to be helpful, and a separate list of names she will and will not write about anymore. Margaret, your publicist, calls Luella's secretary on alternate Wednesdays. Margaret calls Hedda's secretary on Tuesdays. The Tuesdays and Wednesdays do not overlap, which is also Margaret's job. When Ingrid Bergman left for Roberto Rossellini in 1949, both columns ran the story the way the studios needed it run, not favourably. Bergman was gone from Hollywood for 7 years. The columns didn't exile her. The columns just reflected the exile, faithfully, every week, until it was real. You hang up, the housekeeper is still in the doorway. She has the particular expression of someone who heard everything and will not be mentioning this. You go back to your book. Your publicist will call within the hour to confirm the column lands correctly. You already know it will. You sit on the love seat in your living room next to a young woman from Photoplay magazine while a photographer rearranges your 2 favourite books on the coffee table. The publicist is in the corner, on the wingback chair, and he is taking notes. The questions the young woman is asking are not the questions she would ask if the publicist were not in the wingback chair. The answers you are giving are not the answers you would give if your contract did not require you to give them. The books on the coffee table aren't yours. They were selected by someone in publicity 2 days ago, chosen carefully, leather-bound, and quietly fraudulent, and delivered in a paper bag with a note that said, aspirational but approachable. 1. Is a volume of French poetry. You don't speak French. The photographer adjusts the spine so the title faces the camera, and for a moment, the 3 of you, the publicist, the photographer, look at the book the way you'd look at a small animal that has wandered into the wrong room. Nobody mentions it. The interview continues. Photoplay, Modern Screen, and Motion Picture each have an editorial liaison at the studio. The liaisons are women named Frances, Beatrice, and Joan. They sit 2 desks apart in the publicity bullpen on the 2nd floor. They mail out pre-approved quote sheets every Tuesday morning, signed in the name of whichever actress the studio has scheduled for that issue's profile. Your favourite food, as listed in the June issue, was selected by Joan. Joan does not cook. Joan made a small note about your kitchen in the margin of the pull quote sheet, which is also rented. The young woman from Photoplay is doing her job, which is to make you feel like you're having a conversation while you're actually doing a very soft form of corporate dictation. She asks if you ever get lonely. The publicist in the corner lifts his pen without looking up. You say you stay busy with scripts and that the work keeps you grounded. This is the correct answer. You know it's the correct answer because you've given it before, and nobody in the corner moved their pen. The photographer arrives with a list of permitted angles. There is a list. It was negotiated before he walked through the door. Clarence, who moves through your living room with the professional certainty of a man who has rearranged 30 women's bookshelves, positions you on the love seat at a 3/4 angle because the studio's portrait department has determined this is your best side, officially, in writing. Your best side has been documented. It is on file. The issue will be on newsstands in 6 weeks. Your fan mail will increase. The studio will clip the article and file it. Somewhere in a cabinet in Culver City, next to a quarterly production report and a depreciation schedule, there is a folder with your name on it, and that folder contains every Photoplay interview, every column mention, every corrected quote, and a note about whether last quarter's coverage was net positive or net neutral for your asset valuation. Asset. The word doesn't appear in the article. It's in the cabinet. The young woman closes her notebook. She thanks you warmly. She means it. She's not unkind. She's just working inside the same structure you are, and being polite to each other is the structure's preferred lubricant. The publicist stands, buttons his jacket, and shakes her hand. The photographer packs the French poetry book back into the paper bag. You watch him carry it out. The love seat is yours. The lamp is yours. The rest of it was set design. You arrive at the studio's wardrobe annex at 3 on the afternoon of the premiere, and a woman with a clipboard hands you the gown the studio has selected. The gown is not the gown you would have selected. The gown is in a colour the studio has decided, after some discussion in a meeting you were not in, will photograph well against the carpet at Grauman's. You are told who you will arrive with. You are told who you will leave with. Edith Head is somewhere in the building. She may already be in the room. She carries a small leather-bound notebook everywhere on the lot, and the notebook has a satin ribbon that marks the current page, your page, today, with your waist measurement and your hip measurement, and a notation from the weekly weigh-in filed 4 days ago. Edith touches the ribbon when she thinks. She is touching it now, somewhere down the hallway. If the numbers have shifted, the gown has already been taken in at the alterations bench by someone who did not mention this to you and will not. The undergarments are doing most of the work. There's a long-line bra, a waist cincher, and a structured petticoat. There's a hip pad, which is added or removed depending on which profile the camera department has flagged as your better side. By the time Edith is done pinning, your silhouette is less a body than an architectural proposal. You breathe in shallow increments, which is fine, because deep breathing isn't really part of the plan. The gown goes on last. It has opinions. It allows forward motion in increments of about 8 inches per step, which is enough to cross a red carpet if you cross it slowly and smile in a way that reads as serene rather than cautious. The underlying architecture has the structural integrity of a small opinionated cathedral and the same general willingness to bend. The gown could rent itself out as load-bearing furniture in an emergency. A photographer's assistant once described this particular walk as gliding. The word he was looking for was calculating. Meanwhile, your escort for the evening is a man the publicity department has selected on the basis of availability and whether his current picture needs a boost. He is not your boyfriend. He may be someone else's boyfriend, in ways the publicity department has decided not to clarify. He will arrive in a studio car. He will take your arm at the bottom of the stairs. He has been briefed on which direction to turn his face. So have you. The briefing was not optional. Your hair has been done since noon, 3 hours. Your makeup since 2. The face in the mirror is technically yours in the way that a renovation is technically the same house, same address, substantially different load-bearing structure. The foundation alone takes 40 minutes. The lashes are applied in sections by a woman named Margaret who does this 6 days a week and has never once discussed it with the press because Margaret signed something. On the drive to Grauman's, you sit very still. The gown requires it. The car is large enough that sitting very still is also comfortable in the way that a very expensive cage is still a cage, though no one uses that word. You look out the window at Sunset Boulevard sliding past. There are already people lining the blocks near the theatre. They are holding photographs of you. The photographs are the approved ones. You know this because you can see, even from the car, that your hair is doing the thing in the photographs that your hair only does when the studio photographer is in the room. The car slows. Your escort adjusts his tie. The door opens, and the sound hits first. Not applause exactly, but a sustained noise, the shape of applause, something between recognition and hunger. You step out in 8-inch increments. You turn your face the way you were told. The flashbulbs go off like small, very opinionated suns. The gown photographs beautifully against the carpet at Grauman's. The studio had good information on that point. You read the paragraph again at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday in your kitchen, with the cup of tea you have not touched cooling next to your elbow. The paragraph requires you to notify the studio in writing within 30 days of becoming aware of a pregnancy. The paragraph then describes what the studio is entitled to do upon receiving the notification. There is a list. The list is long. You are 8 days into the 30-day notification window. The list includes suspension. The studio does not explain what suspension means in the meeting where you signed. The studio lets you find this out in a kitchen, on a Tuesday, with cold tea. Notification, in practice, means a meeting with a contracts coordinator named Margaret, followed by a referral to a man named Dr. Shipley, who walks onto the Fox lot every Tuesday with a small leather case and the upright posture of someone who has never been audited. Dr. Shipley uses words like advisable and timing and the production schedule. He does not say the other thing out loud. He doesn't need to. The list in the paragraph already said it. Loretta Young resolved this problem in 1935 by disappearing, not metaphorically. She left Hollywood, gave birth to Clark Gable's daughter in a house in Sunland, California, and returned some months later with a story about adopting a child from an orphanage. The orphan had her nose. Nobody said anything about the nose, at least not in print, because Hedda Hopper had been given a different story and Luella Parsons had been given the same different story, and the two of them typing the same fiction simultaneously made it approximately true. The fiction held for decades. The daughter found out in stages. Margaret, the studio's contracts coordinator, slides the notification form across her desk with the practiced calm of someone who has done this before and will do it again before Thursday. She's wearing a green cardigan with a small coffee stain near the second button that she has not noticed or decided not to mind. She doesn't meet your eyes when she explains the suspension clause. She meets the form. Of course, the form has a second page. The second page concerns image rights. If the studio has invested in promotional materials featuring your current figure, your current face, your current waist measurement, the architecture Edith Head built around you at 6 in the morning, then any material change to that figure constitutes a breach of a separate clause on the second page. The second page refers back to the first page. The first page refers to your contract. Your contract is 84 pages long and was written by attorneys who billed by the hour and took the full hour. The arithmetic on the second sheet Margaret hands you becomes legible only after you read it 3 times. You earn your contracted weekly salary while suspended. You do not work. You do not accumulate contract years. You receive a check in an envelope, and the check is the correct amount, and it arrives on time. The studio has calculated that the on-time check costs less than a legal challenge. The years are taken quietly, in weekly increments, with a return address. The morality clause on page 12 uses the phrase conduct unbecoming. Pregnancy isn't listed there. Pregnancy lives in a separate clause, in a separate section, under production contingencies. The categorization is neat, deliberate, and entirely the studio's. You do not need it explained. The form is very clear, and Margaret is still not looking up, and the coffee stain on the green cardigan is still there, and the tea at home is stone cold now, and you are 7 days into the window. You disappear from Hollywood in February. You reappear in November, 53 pounds heavier in February, and 31 pounds lighter in November, with a story you have been rehearsing since June. The story is that you have adopted a baby girl from an orphanage in the Pacific Northwest. The story has been placed with 2 columnists and 1 fan magazine, and is supported by paperwork arranged by a lawyer the studio recommends to people in your situation. You will tell the story for the next 28 years. The orphanage doesn't exist. The paperwork does. This is a meaningful distinction in 1935, when paperwork is the only thing that gets audited. Hedda Hopper has a typewriter, 2 telephones, and a hat collection that functions as a quiet, costly, and reliably load-bearing threat delivery system. Luella Parsons has a nationally syndicated column, a standing arrangement with William Randolph Hearst, and the memory of an elephant that has never once forgiven anything. Between them, they reach roughly 30 million readers a week. The studio phones one of them, not both, never both at once, that's how you start a war, and dictates the preferred version of events. The columnist writes it down, the magazine prints it. Your readers absorb it with their morning coffee and feel warm about you. Luella's typewriter sits on a heavy oak desk her secretary polishes with lemon oil on Mondays. The lemon oil smell, by Wednesday afternoon, is mostly cigarette. The columnist receives things in exchange. Access, exclusives, advanced stills, a friendly call before someone else's scandal breaks, so she can get there first and frame it correctly. Hedda Hopper is at her desk right now, receiver in hand, wearing a hat the approximate size and confidence of a small porch awning. She writes your name next to the word adoption. She uses the word blessed. She may believe it. It doesn't matter whether she believes it. The hat believes it. The baby's name is Judy. She's been given your last name and a birth certificate that lists a county you've never visited. A nurse named Margaret, whose last name you were not told, hands the baby to you in a room that isn't a hospital room. Margaret straightens the receiving blanket with the focused attention of someone who has done this before and who will never testify to having done it. You hold the child. You smile for a photograph that was arranged in advance. The photographer knows what the photograph is for. He doesn't say anything about it. Neither do you. The story holds because everyone inside it agrees to hold it. The studio holds it because a healthy adoption narrative is easier to ensure than an illegitimate birth is to explain. The columnist holds it because the studio keeps calling. The lawyer holds it because that's what you're paying the lawyer for. And you hold it because the alternative, the true version, the one involving the child's actual father, who is under his own contract, who has his own story, is a version that ends with both of you in suspension and neither of you working for the foreseeable future. Judy grows up. She is a serious child with her mother's eyes and a biography that doesn't line up if you look at it carefully, which most people don't, because most people are busy. She calls you mother. You are her mother. These 2 facts coexist without resolving. The story cracks in 1966, when a journalist does look carefully. By then, you've been telling it for 31 years. The telling has become its own kind of truth, not accurate, but load-bearing. Remove it, and something collapses. Judy is 31 years old and has a daughter of her own, and you are on the phone with a publicist who was not alive in 1935, explaining a fiction to someone who can only see its edges. You tell the story one more time. You have gotten very good at it. You marry a man at City Hall on a Wednesday at 11 in the morning. The man is a friend of yours. The man is also under contract at the same studio. Neither of you intends to live with the other person, but the lease on the house the studio has rented in both your names is for 36 months, and your publicists have agreed that 2 of those months will involve a photographer from Modern Screen visiting for what the magazine will describe as a quiet afternoon at home. The quiet afternoon at home takes approximately 3 hours longer than it should. A set decorator named Gerald, who also works on the back lot and smells permanently of fresh paint, has arranged fresh flowers in the kitchen, a half-finished jigsaw puzzle on the coffee table, and 2 mugs of tea that will go cold during the shoot because neither of you is allowed to actually drink from them. Gerald adjusts the puzzle pieces twice. He's perfected the geometry of implied leisure, which is not legally a real geometry but has held up to inspection so far. The morality clause isn't in the marriage. It's in the contract that made the marriage necessary. The clause runs to 3 paragraphs and covers conduct unbecoming, which the studio's legal department has defined broadly enough to include almost any private life you might otherwise have had. Homosexuality isn't named. It doesn't need to be. The word turpitude is doing that work, and everyone in the room understands it. Your co-husband is gay. You know this. He knows you know this. The studio knows both of these things, and has decided that what it actually knows is that you are a charming young couple with a mortgage in Bel Air and a Labrador mix named something like Biscuit. Biscuit is real. Biscuit doesn't know about any of this. Biscuit has, in many ways, the simplest relationship in the house. The fan magazines run the story the way they run every story, with the studio's preferred adjectives already in the copy by the time the editor sees it. Modern Screen describes your kitchen as warmly appointed. Photoplay calls your marriage radiantly practical, which is a phrase no human being has ever used to describe a marriage they were, actually, in. Your publicist clips both pieces and files them. The file is labelled with your last name, professionally. Not your new last name, your real one, the one that was already on the balance sheet. Of course, the man you've married is not without his own calculations. He needs the same cover you need. He also needs a garage, and the studio house has a 2-car garage, and his previous apartment had a parking situation that he has described to you, in quiet sincerity, as genuinely untenable. You understand each other completely. This is, genuinely, one of the better relationships either of you has been in. The 36-month lease has a renewal option the studio holds, not you. If your box office slips before the lease is up, the studio will let it lapse, reassign the gardener, and quietly suggest that the 2 of you have decided to focus on your individual careers at this time. Photoplay will describe the split as amicable. Amicable is the studio's favourite word for anything it has already decided. Sometimes, in the evenings, you sit in the warmly appointed kitchen and eat dinner while Gerald's jigsaw puzzle sits in the other room, still half finished, because neither of you has touched it since the photographer left. It's a covered bridge in Vermont, wooden, picturesque, and entirely theoretical. Neither of you has been to Vermont. The puzzle has 1,000 pieces and a confident opinion about how your living room should make people feel. The envelope arrives by courier at 3 in the afternoon and the housekeeper signs for it. The envelope is from the United States Congress. The letter inside the envelope asks you to appear before the House Un-American Activities Committee on a specific Wednesday in October, and it lists 7 names. The letter requests that you confirm whether you have had any association with any of the 7 names. The studio's lawyer is at your house within 40 minutes. He sits across from you in your living room with a briefcase that contains, as far as you can tell, mostly other briefcases. He explains that there are 2 responses to a HUAC subpoena. One is to cooperate fully, confirm the names on the list, and return to work by Thursday. The other is to invoke the First Amendment or the Fifth Amendment, decline to testify, and discover what your contract actually means when read in the direction it was designed to be read. The lawyer doesn't tell you which response is correct. He tells you which response the studio prefers. These are not the same thing, and both of you know it. Cooperation, as a possibility, looks like this. You appear before the committee on the specific Wednesday. You confirm that yes, you attended a meeting in 1944 that was also attended by at least one of the 7 names. You didn't know they were on a list. The meeting was about something you no longer remember clearly. A benefit, a reading, a union-adjacent discussion in someone's living room with folding chairs and bad coffee. None of that context appears in the record. The record contains only your name and the names you confirmed. Someone's career ends. You return to work on Thursday. Anne Revere wins an Academy Award for National Velvet in 1945 and refuses to testify before HUAC in 1951. She doesn't renounce anything. She doesn't make a speech. She simply declines. Her film career ends immediately and does not resume in any meaningful way for 2 decades. The award is still hers. It sits somewhere. The camera doesn't care. The Screen Actors Guild is theoretically your protection. The body that negotiated your 12-hour turnaround, your minimum salary, your right to not be a piece of industrial equipment without representation. In 1947, SAG's president signs a pledge committing the guild to cooperate with HUAC investigations and to remove communists from membership. The president's name is Ronald Reagan. The pledge is enthusiastic. The guild's protection during the blacklist years is, to use a technical term, not great. The morality clause, naturally, covers this too. The same clause that handled homosexuality under the language of moral turpitude handles political association under the language of conduct detrimental to the studio's interests. The clause doesn't need a specific accusation, it needs a reasonable concern. The studio's legal department has a flexible, expansive, and highly developed sense of what constitutes reasonable. Theodore in Legal, the man with the small framed photograph of his wife on his desk, sharpens a pencil before he begins his memo. Meanwhile, the gossip column has been updated. Hedda Hopper, at her typewriter, receives a brief note from a studio contact confirming that a particular actress has been called to testify. By the next morning, the column notes that the actress is under review for certain prior associations. The actress hasn't testified yet. The column doesn't wait. Hedda's typewriter is operating at approximately the same speed as the HUAC committee itself, and with more subscribers. The 7 names on your letter are not all equal. The first one, a screenwriter named Henry Pollard, who you sat next to at one Writers Guild dinner in 1944, and who spent the entire meal trying to convince you that the studio commissary's coffee was a metaphor for something, signed a petition in 1943. The petition was about housing. You don't remember Henry's last name correctly until your agent says it on the phone 3 days later. One of the other 6 attended 3 union meetings in a row, which apparently crosses a threshold. One donated money to a Spanish Civil War relief organization in 1938, which by 1951 has been recontextualized into something it wasn't. The list doesn't explain itself. The list is a list. You are expected to sort through your own memory and identify which of your past relationships are safe to confirm and which ones you'd prefer to take your chances on, legally speaking. While sitting in front of a congressional committee in October, a studio publicist named Vivian stops by your dressing room 2 days before the Wednesday. She sets a small card on your vanity table without making eye contact and tells you that the studio would like to help you prepare your remarks. She says remarks the way someone says remarks when they mean answers. The card has 3 bullet points. The 3rd bullet point begins with the phrase, "I have always believed in American values." Vivian leaves before you can respond. The card stays on the vanity. The makeup brush sits next to it. Your agent calls you on a Thursday and uses a tone you have heard him use exactly once before. He does not use the word blacklist. He uses the words a small problem with availability, and he uses the word temporary, and he uses the phrase in the current climate. And you sit in your kitchen and listen to the words add up to a sentence neither of you is going to say out loud. The sentence is that you are not going to work. He calls it a pause. A pause is what happens between 2 things. This is not between 2 things. This is just after one thing, and the next thing hasn't been scheduled yet, and the silence is professional, courteous, and entirely unbreakable. Nobody in the industry is returning calls to find out when it might be. Marta is doing the second pass through your refrigerator at 3:15 in the afternoon. There is nothing in the refrigerator that requires a second pass. Marta does the second pass because she has decided not to be in the room while your agent is talking. And the refrigerator is the second most quiet room in this kitchen, which is itself the second most quiet room in this house. She has a small handkerchief in her pocket. She has not used it. Anne Revere won an Oscar for National Velvet in 1946. An Oscar. The kind of award that gets framed and placed where guests can see it from the hallway. By 1951, her career is over, not ended by a rival, not ended by a scandal, ended by a refusal to give HUAC names it already had. The Academy Award is still on the wall. The phone has stopped ringing. Both things are true at the same time. Your agent suggests you consider a statement, not a retraction. You haven't said anything publicly. A statement of clarification. A clarification that you are not, have never been, and do not intend to be a person of interest to committees concerned with loyalty. He has a draft. He dictated it to his secretary this morning. The secretary typed it on studio-adjacent letterhead, and the whole thing took about 11 minutes, which is roughly how long your career has been officially paused. The draft uses the phrase deeply committed to American values. You read it twice. You put it down. You pick it up again. Marta, your housekeeper, is doing something with a pot near the stove that involves a great deal of purposeful clanking, because Marta is very good at not being in the room while being completely in the room. The pot, for its part, is innocent. The pot did not sign anything. Marta sets down a saucer of toast you didn't ask for and goes back to the stove. The studio has another picture starting in 6 weeks. The studio has 3 other women under contract who haven't been subpoenaed and who are currently returning calls. You are a line item on the same balance sheet those 3 women are on, and balance sheets don't pause for loyalty, they pause for liability. The attorney at the studio's legal department is a man named Theodore, who has worked in the same 4th-floor office since 1947. Theodore keeps a small framed photograph of his wife on his desk, slightly angled so the photograph can be seen by a visitor but not by Theodore while he's working. Theodore is, this Wednesday afternoon, expanding a 4-line internal memo about your option clause into a 14-line internal memo. He sharpens his pencil twice. The pencil shavings go into a small brass cup his wife gave him in 1950. Hedda Hopper has already mentioned your name. Not in connection with anything specific. Just mentioned it. In that way she has of mentioning names near other names, and letting the proximity do the editorial work. By tomorrow the proximity will have been repeated 3 times by 3 different readers and will have become, in the way these things become, a fact. You open the envelope on a Friday at the same desk where you read the contract you signed 7 years ago. The pay stub says $1,500, gross. The pay stub does not mention the film that opened last weekend and grossed $5 million in its first 3 days, because the relationship between the pay stub and the film is not a relationship the studio's accounting department feels you need to be reminded of. The dollar figure has not changed since 1951. $1,500 a week sounds reasonable until you put it next to the number 5 million, at which point it stops sounding reasonable and starts sounding like a clerical error nobody intends to fix. The 1,500 has been the 1,500 since some time before 1951. Marilyn Monroe earns exactly this. $1,500 a week from Fox, while Gentlemen Prefer Blondes earns $5 million domestic. And the studio earns every cent of the difference, cleanly and legally, because the contract she signed in 1951 contains no residuals clause for theatrical exhibition. It contains a lot of other things. It doesn't contain that. Edna, the bookkeeper at Fox who does the loan-out math on a green ledger sheet every Friday, signs each completed page with her initials in the bottom right corner. The ledger lives in a metal cabinet whose key is on a ring, with 3 other keys, 2 of which are for cabinets nobody currently working at Fox remembers using. Fox's bookkeeper, a woman named Edna, does the loan-out math on a green ledger sheet every Friday. When Fox rents you to another studio for 6 weeks, Edna invoices that studio at your market rate, which is considerably higher than $1,500 a week, because your market rate is what Fox would charge a stranger and your salary is what they pay someone they own. The difference stays at Fox. You receive your normal weekly check, unchanged. Edna initials the page and slides it into the cabinet. Audrey Hepburn arrived in Hollywood without a studio contract and negotiated picture by picture. She receives $350,000 for Sabrina in 1954, 1 film. Her agent's office is on the same Wilshire block as the lawyer Marilyn Monroe will walk into in January. Audrey's agent has, on his desk, a small carved wooden duck that he turns toward the visitor's chair before any meeting that involves a contract. The duck is, by his calculation, a calming object. The press materials, of course, describe you differently. Photoplay runs a profile in March. There's a photograph of you in the kitchen of a house you are renting because the studio doesn't pay you enough to buy one. The caption calls you radiant. The article calls you America's sweetheart. Nobody in the article mentions the $1,500 or the $5 million or the difference between them, which is sitting in an account in Culver City earning interest. A woman named Dorothy, who handles your fan mail in a windowless office on the Fox lot, slides a fresh stack of envelopes across her desk without looking up. She gets $42 a week. She has been here longer than you have. She will be here after you're gone. The envelopes contain letters from people who love you, which is not nothing. It is not, however, the difference between $1,500 and $5 million. That difference is in a different kind of envelope entirely, and it was never addressed to you. You sit on the edge of the bed at 10:45 with the second cup of the day in your hand. The cup is the smaller of the two cups. The pill is the smaller of the two pills. Your call sheet for tomorrow is on the nightstand and tomorrow's call is at 4:15, which means you have, by the studio's calendar, 5 hours and 20 minutes of available sleep before the alarm. You drink the cup. You lie down. The pill is not a vitamin. It is not an aspirin. The studio physician walked onto the soundstage this afternoon with a small case, the kind with a brass clasp and a felt interior, and handed you a tablet the way a colleague might hand you a pen. He answered to payroll. He did not answer to a hospital. You didn't ask what it was because you already knew, and because asking had not historically produced useful information. The amphetamine gets you through the afternoon, through the last 4 setups, through the corset scene, through the scene after the corset scene where you are required to seem delighted. The barbiturate gets the night over with quickly enough that the amphetamine the following morning has somewhere to begin. Gerald, the prop coordinator, keeps both cups in the same labelled tray in the same cabinet between stage 4 and the wardrobe annex. The cabinet has a key. Gerald has the key. The cabinet is restocked every Wednesday by a man neither of you has met. Judy Garland was 15 the first time. 15. And a studio employee in a white coat stood in front of her and held out a pill, and she swallowed it, because an adult in an official capacity had presented it, and there was a production schedule involved. MGM had calculated that she needed to be thinner, more energetic, and available for longer days than a human body could sustain on sleep and sandwiches alone. The solution was not fewer days. The solution was in the small felt case with the brass clasp. She spent the next decade learning which pill was which by the shape. You are 26, which means you've been doing this long enough to have opinions. Not about the pills. You don't have opinions about the pills technically, but about the cup. The second cup. The smaller one. A studio prop coordinator named Gerald, who is conscientious in the specific way of someone who has been doing a thing for too long, leaves it on your dressing room counter each night at 10:30 without being asked. Because he was asked once, in 1952, and has never stopped. He sets it down, adjusts it a 1/4 inch to the right so the handle faces you, and leaves without speaking. The cup has a small chip on the base that nobody has repaired. The studio physician's case appears on the call sheet between camera tests and lunch, in the same font as everything else. Gerald restocks the felt-lined compartments each morning before the makeup chairs fill. If the shooting schedule expands, and it expands, the case gets larger by Friday. Gerald sources the larger case from a supplier in Burbank and signs for it himself. There is no form for the form. The alarm is set for 3:45. You know from experience that 3:45 and 4:15 arrive as the same moment. One is when the sound begins and one is when you're actually upright and wearing shoes. 5 hours and 20 minutes was always a courtesy fiction. The pill is already doing something at the edges of your thinking, a kind of administrative smoothing, and the nightstand blurs softly, and the call sheet is still there, and the number on it is still 4:15. You don't fight it. That stopped being useful some time ago. The alarm clock on the nightstand is quiet, dutiful, and reliably cruel. It will ring at 3:45. It will not be alone. You drive to Beverly Hills on a Saturday morning at 11 for the appointment that does not appear in any official record. The doctor's office is on Roxbury Drive, and his receptionist greets you by a name that is not the name on your contract. He takes a chart down from a shelf. The chart has a number on it, but no name. The procedure he is going to perform this morning has been discussed twice in the last 6 weeks, once in his office and once in a producer's. The procedure isn't medical, exactly. It isn't cosmetic, exactly. It occupies the space between those two categories where the studio has decided your face requires adjustment, and adjusting it is simply part of keeping an asset in production condition. The doctor answers to a studio contract, not to a licensing board. His chart numbers are not cross-referenced anywhere a patient advocate could find them. He has very good equipment and excellent coffee. Rita Hayworth sat in a chair like this one for 18 months. You know that the way one actress knows another's appointments, through Margaret in Publicity, through the printed Columbia call sheets that were left in the wrong dressing room once in 1949, through the fact that you were briefly considered for the part Hayworth eventually played in Gilda. Columbia decided her hairline was too low, her forehead too narrow, her features too ethnic for the roles they had in mind. A technician moved her hairline backward, millimetre by millimetre, over appointment after appointment, until her face was the face Columbia wanted to sell. Hayworth's original hairline did not survive the decade. She became one of the most photographed women of the decade. Nobody prints the before. Marilyn's jaw has been addressed. Elizabeth Taylor's brows are already thin to a line. An MGM esthetician has been doing this since Taylor was 12, with the same purposeful calm as someone adjusting a prop. A salaried person. There for her eyebrows. She is 12. The word the doctor uses for what he's about to do is correction. Skin that reads as too olive under Technicolor is corrected. A nose that reads as too broad is corrected. A forehead that reads as too something, a casting director said once in a meeting, is corrected. The word does the work of an entire sentence the studio prefers not to say out loud. Back on Roxbury Drive, a nurse named Patricia Dunn sets a small metal tray on the counter beside your chair. Patricia does this without looking at you directly, which you have come to understand as a professional courtesy rather than a slight. The instruments are arranged in a neat row gleaming like a very serious cutlery set at a restaurant nobody enjoys. Patricia squares the tray with the edge of the counter. She does this every time. The tray is already perfectly straight when she does it. The tray, you suspect, has opinions about Patricia's standards but has learned to keep them to itself. The doctor reviews the chart number and makes a note. He doesn't read the note back to you. Whatever is written there belongs to the file, and the file belongs to the studio's medical account, not to you, which means you are not technically entitled to ask what it says, and technically is doing a great deal of work in that sentence. You've signed a document. You signed it the same afternoon you signed 14 other documents, in a room with wood panelling and a view of a parking lot, while a junior business affairs associate explained the general concept of each page without reading the specific language. The general concept of this one was Studio Health Services. The specific language is in a drawer somewhere in Culver City and you will not see it again. The procedure takes 40 minutes. When it's finished, your face looks like your face. It does not look like your face. Both of these are true. The redness will have resolved, calm, smooth, and entirely camera ready. By Tuesday morning, you will be in front of the camera at 6. You will look like the version of yourself that tested well in Kansas City, and Kansas City will never know the difference, and neither, honestly, will you after a few more months of this. You arrive at the stable in Burbank at 6 in the morning on a Sunday, which the contract permits the studio to use for what the contract calls preparation, and the riding instructor is already there, leading a horse you have ridden once before in a circle around a small ring. The studio has decided that your next picture is a Western. The picture begins shooting in 11 weeks. You have 11 weeks to learn to look like a person who has ridden horses since childhood. The riding instructor's name is Don. Don wears a hat with a crease so precise it could file a tax return. He does not say, "Good morning." He hands you a helmet by its strap with the dignity of an undertaker and returns his attention to the horse, which has formed its own opinion about the morning and is sharing it with the dirt as if the dirt had asked. Preparation on a Sunday means this. It means you signed a contract that allows the studio to schedule you for skill acquisition on your day off at a facility the studio has retained, supervised by a person the studio pays, so that you arrive on a set in 11 weeks and perform competence you did not have in 12. Don sets out a second cup of coffee on a small overturned crate near the rail. The cup is for him. There is no second cup for you. The horse is named Champion, which every horse on every studio-adjacent ranch in Burbank appears to be named. Champion is the kind of horse that doesn't comment. Champion is large. Champion is patient in the way that objects under considerable internal pressure are patient, still on the outside, doing math on the inside. You mount. Champion decides this is acceptable. For now. Don calls out corrections in a voice he has been using since before you were born. Heels down, hands soft. Don't grip. You are gripping. You are gripping because you are 6 feet off the ground on an animal with a separate nervous system that you cannot consult, and the word soft is doing a lot of work this early in the morning. None of this is in your contract in the sense of being legible to you. The clause is short, vague, and reliably elastic. 4 lines. Reference to ancillary production skills training. No maximum hours. The studio's legal department read those 4 lines very carefully. You did not read those 4 lines. Your agent read those 4 lines and said it was standard. By 9 o'clock you have been on the horse for 2 hours and you have learned 3 things. First, that you can post a trot without losing the reins. Second, that Champion will spook at the same fence post every single pass, without variation, with the commitment of a character actor who has found his bit. Third, that your lower back has registered a formal complaint and is awaiting a response. Don writes something on a clipboard. He shows you nothing written on the clipboard. The clipboard is for Don. You exist on the clipboard as a set of notes, posture, grip, footwork that will eventually become a memo to the unit production manager that says you are camera ready for a canter by week 6. The memo will not mention your lower back. The stable hand, a teenager named Roy who smells aggressively of hay and appears to have been present since before the stable itself was built, takes Champion's reins during the water break and pats the horse on the nose with the focused tenderness of a person who has decided horses are less complicated than people. He's probably right. Champion leans into the pat. Champion has never once appeared on a balance sheet. You are back on by 9:15. The Burbank morning is heating up in the particular way Southern California mornings heat up, gradually, then with commitment. Don says, again, heels down. The horse beneath you is warm and moving and entirely indifferent to your career. It is, in its way, the most honest relationship you have had in 3 years in this business. You walk into a lawyer's office on Wilshire in January of 1954 and you sit across from him and you tell him you want to start a production company. The lawyer is a friend of a friend. The lawyer is not anyone the studio has ever recommended, which is, today, the point. He listens. He asks 2 questions about your contract and 1 question about your bank account, and then he tells you that what you are proposing is legal and that it will be the most expensive thing you have ever done. The company will be called Marilyn Monroe Productions. The other founder is Milton Green, a photographer, which the studio will later treat as evidence of something sinister, though they won't specify what. You've been earning $1,500 a week at Fox while Gentlemen Prefer Blondes has been sitting on their books as a $5 million domestic gross on a $2.1 million budget. You have done the subtraction. The subtraction has not been flattering to anyone but Fox. The lawyer slides a yellow legal pad across the desk. He has written 2 columns. The left column is what you own. The right column is what Fox owns. The right column takes up more of the page. It takes up almost all of the page. The right column has the unhurried, content expression of a guest who has settled into the better armchair and is in no rush to leave. Your name is in the right column, which is one of those details that takes a moment to fully arrive. Fox's response is swift, institutional, and faintly personal. They suspend you. The suspension is presented as a contractual consequence, which it is, because they wrote the contract and they wrote the consequences and they are the same entity. The paperwork doesn't comment on the math. The paperwork never comments. Then the press campaign begins. This is where it gets efficient. A studio publicist named Gerald with the small notebook he carries always tucked into the same breast pocket, begins making calls. The calls go to fan magazines, to columnists, to the wire services. The story when it emerges is that you are difficult, ungrateful, being manipulated by a photographer with unclear motives. The story does not mention the $1,500 a week against the $5 million gross. The story has made a considered editorial choice about what to leave out. Hedda Hopper runs 3 items in 5 weeks. The items are sympathetic to Fox. They always are, the way a TripAdvisor review is sympathetic to the hotel that comped the room. Hedda has 2 telephones on her desk and a reader base large enough to redecorate a reputation by Thursday. You read the items in a diner on Sunset because the hotel you're staying at keeps a stack of papers near the coffee. The diner's coffee is worse than the studio commissary coffee. The commissary coffee was terrible. This is worse. Milton Green shows up to the lawyer's office the following week with a folder of incorporation documents and an extremely calm demeanor. which is either reassuring or the specific calm of someone who has not yet understood the situation. He signs where indicated. You sign where indicated. Marilyn Monroe Productions is officially a corporation registered in the state of New York, which is also a considered choice, distance-wise. The company's first project is Bus Stop. Fox will eventually come back with a new contract, more money, more creative control, a clause acknowledging your right to approve directors. You'll get $400,000 for Some Like It Hot, which is not $5 million but is also not $1,500 a week. The lawyer on Wilshire will call it a settlement. You will call it a result. The difference between those two words is roughly the size of the right column on the legal pad, which you've kept, folded into thirds, in the outside pocket of your bag ever since. You walk through the gate at 5:45 on a Friday in 1960 for what will be, by the calendar in the legal department, the last day of your contract. The guard at the gate knows. The makeup department knows. The dietitian knows. The publicist, who has not been your publicist for the last 6 months because the publicist has been quietly reassigned, knows. Nobody says anything because saying anything is not the kind of thing the studio system is structured to accommodate. The makeup chair is cold at this hour. The woman with the powder brush has been doing your face since 1953, and she doesn't look up when you sit down. She knows your eyelid shape better than you do. She knows the scar from the 1955 lens flare incident, the one that never made the trades because the studio's medical coordinator filed it under minor abrasion. Resolved. Her brush moves with the patient efficiency of a metronome. The chair, for its part, has no opinion about any of this. It just holds you like a piece of furniture that has finally accepted what it is. Margaret in payroll arrives at her desk at 6:30. As she has arrived at her desk at 6:30 since 1947, she takes the cover off her typewriter. She takes the green ledger sheet for your account out of the top drawer. The ledger sheet is the last one she will type on for this account, and she will not mention this to anyone because Margaret does not mention things. She types the date. She types the next line, a fractured wrist from a 1957 set fall that the studio's official statement called minor and unrelated to production, and then the line below it, which is a director's name from a 1955 picture whose 32 takes of a single scene you declined to be in. She does not look up when the morning shift walks past her doorway. The guard at the inner gate is reading a different newspaper today, a different sports section. He folds it in half when he sees you coming, the way he has folded a newspaper for you on Fridays since 1954, and he nods, and you nod, and neither of you produces a sentence. Except today the nod is a quarter-inch slower than it was on Monday, which is the only acknowledgement you will receive on this lot that this is the last Friday. There is, also, the question of what happens next. Audrey Hepburn negotiated picture by picture and earned $350,000 for Sabrina in 1954. You know this the way you know about a city you've never visited, as a fact that exists in another altitude entirely. Independent production was becoming real by 1960. United Artists was signing picture deals rather than people. The machinery was unwinding, slowly, decisively, and all at once. A grip named Walter passes you in the corridor near stage 4 and tips his cap. Walter has tipped his cap at you every morning since 1954. He does it the same way each time, 2 fingers, a small forward tilt, eyes already moving past you to whatever cable needs attending. It is the most honest gesture you have received on this lot. It contains no deduction column. You finish the last setup at 6:15 in the evening. The camera rolls. The director says cut. He says it the way directors say cut when it's the last one, slightly flatter than usual, with a half-second pause before he looks at the script supervisor. The arc lamp's cool. The smell shifts from burnt carbon to something cooler and drier, the way a soundstage smells when the heat source stops believing in itself. You walk back through the gate at 7:40. The guard nods with the brief professional warmth of a man who has been doing this since 1948. The contract, somewhere in the legal department, clicks over to a number it was always going to reach, quietly, formally, and entirely on time. The number is the kind of number that doesn't announce itself. Nobody from publicity is waiting. Nobody from publicity was going to be waiting. That part you knew. And so, you survived the 4 a.m. call sheet, the corseted 20-inch waist, and the carbon arc lamps that crisped the eyelashes they were paid to flatter. You survived the dietitian's clipboard, the studio physician's leather case, and the man with the wrong buttons on his white coat. You survived the morality clause, the loan-out memo, and the gossip columnist with the load-bearing hat. You survived the 7-year contract that became 9, the suspension that paused the clock but not the rent, and Otto Preminger on take 39. That you made it through this much polite, scheduled, beautifully lit institutional control is genuinely impressive, even if you, technically, were lying very still in a bed while it happened. Now let your shoulders drop. Let the call sheet go cold on the nightstand. Let the alarm forget to ring. You can sleep past 4. You can eat the bread. Nobody is weighing you on Monday. Nobody is rewriting your hairline by Wednesday. The needle on the scale does not have a column called action, and the dietitian will not appear between the eggs and the coffee. Thank you for spending this one with me. Sleep deeply, sleep long, sleep with the specific piece of a person whose face is entirely her own. Good night.